Oh, looks like...
It would appear that we might be good with this call.
Yay.
Sir, can you hear me? I cannot hear you, so just give me 1 second here. Now I should be able to hear you.
Here.
Yay!
Hey!
There we go.
How are you doing today?
Doing just fine. How are you all?
I am good, and you are Dr. Joe.
I am.
Dr. Joe, welcome to Desert Bus.
Thank you much.
How are you doing today?
Great.
I see you've got a stormtrooper head in the background, so you've done quite well for yourself.
Everybody else to go with it too.
A man of means.
Yes,
with
exactly.
a stormtrooper.
If you could just go ahead and introduce yourself and let the chat know what it is you do.
Sure. So, Dr. Joe Albietz, I'm a pediatric intensivist, which means that I'm a pediatrician who works exclusively in the ICU, so no outpatient stuff. I take care of kids from very soon after birth all the way through adulthood. No longer kids at that point, but you get the point. And really, we take care of anything that is acutely life-threatening. Sometimes patients are with us for just a few days. Sometimes they're with us for months and potentially longer than that. In addition to being a pediatric intensivist, I wear a bunch of other hats around the hospital. I'm an informaticist, and the one that's most relevant here is that I'm also the medical director of Child Life. That's a brand new position, actually worldwide, and it's one that is supported by Child's Play.
Awesome. How long has your hospital been working with Child's Play?
Working with Child's Play in any capacity for as long as I can remember, probably as long as Child's Play has been active or very soon thereafter. We have a bunch of different projects with Child's Play, though, so we can talk about any of those that you'd like. For the medical director position is one that was funded and started right at the end of this past spring. We also have the game technology specialist position, which we can go into detail on, but that has been about a year and some change now.
I mean, I'd love to hear about just that position, so tell us a little bit.
So Child's Play has been outstanding for all the children's hospitals. The amount of good that is done is incalculable. But one of the challenges that we saw in the hospital end and that Child's Play saw as well is that a lot of the games and the consoles and other equipment that gets donated is sometimes challenging for the medical staff to be able to distribute and make sure it's in kids' hands and updated and functional, and that they understand the right child to give the right game to. And that requires a little bit of expertise. When you start getting into things outside of just normal console gaming and we start talking about some of the really fun stuff like virtual reality, then that's a whole other level of complication that most hospital staff just isn't familiar with. So working with my colleagues in Child Life, we really wanted to make the best use of that stuff possible and not just getting into the kids' hands, but there's a lot of this that has the potential to be really clinically useful. Just like I would prescribe a medication or we would have different therapies, and there's some of these experiences that have the ability to take the place of or at least augment distraction, pain medications, maybe the ability to avoid anesthesia in certain situations entirely, letting kids escape the four walls. But to do any of that, we needed help. So we sat down, looked at our capabilities, looked at the capabilities of all of our colleagues around the country, and I identified that really we need somebody with expertise in both realms, somebody who understood the IT component of gaming and then also understood the child's end of things and the family's end of things within the hospital, who'd be able to talk to the kids, to talk to the families, and talk to the staff and make sure that we're using all this really well. That, in sum total, is what the gaming technology specialist role does. So we wrote all that up and submitted that to Child's Play, and we were the first hospital through Child's Play that got that position funded. It has gone phenomenally well, and now there have been, I want to say this number is always changing, but I think 9 other leading children's hospitals who have at least submitted for the gaming technology specialist positions, and several others that have been filled. So what I think we're seeing, and what I'm pushing, and my staff is pushing, is for this to be a new established role within pediatric hospitals.
That sounds fantastic.
Can I jump in there really quick? One sentence that really struck out to me when he said there is
children can actually play games over an anesthetic? Did I hear that correctly?
Instead of an anesthetic?
It almost sounded like this play can be used in the place of drugs for some treatments.
They can.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. We just published a case report, and there's others out there in the literature, but we just put in a case report of a child young man, he was a teenager, who was undergoing lumbar puncture, and he had this done repeatedly. I won't go into his details, but something he was unfortunately used to. But to tolerate getting a lumbar puncture, that's a spinal tap, is what people oftentimes call them. He would have to go under anesthesia and was unconscious, which means if anybody's ever gone under a procedure, you have to have an empty stomach going in. Usually it's at least 6 hours. Sometimes it's overnight. So you're hungry going in. You then get the medications. You're put to sleep. Pain is controlled, and then you have the emergence from that medication, right? So you're uncomfortable beforehand. You have the experience of the medications, the risks of the medications. Yeah. And then the emergence, sometimes that's nausea, sometimes it's just feeling groggy for a while before you can eat and then go home. Stretches out the total amount of time. But what he was able to do is simply wearing the virtual reality headset. We had some games set aside for him that he could get into. The learning curve was very, very short. And he was able to simply play VR while he had his LP done. And we've had other children who have followed that path since. We've got a study now which is going through our IRB to actually do a randomized controlled trial of that approach. And the hope is that this is wins across the board.
That's incredible.
It's not that everybody's going to be able to do it, but a lot of people will. And it saves money, it saves time, it's a more pleasant experience for them. And honestly, what I love about this is that it puts the patients back in control. So tons of wins.
Wow, that's really cool.
That's incredible.
And you're talking about VR a lot, and I remember we've been doing this for 12 years now, and I think in some way we've been supporting Child's Play for even longer. And for the longest time, it's always just been about consoles and video games and iPads. And I remember last year is when I first started really hearing about VR in hospitals, which I think is really neat. And I'm just wondering, what are the benefits to VR over a classic gaming console?
Sure, and there's benefits to both. I'm not knocking consoles. I'm a huge console gamer myself. But when it comes to VR, there's several things that make it clinically really, really interesting. The first is picture yourself in a hospital bed. You're not able to leave the room. You're having things done to you, and oftentimes it's things that you can't touch back. You've got this loss of control. You've got alarms that go off. There are conversations happening right outside your door, inside your room. There's all the activity of a hospital going on 24/7, and we know that is not an ideal situation. And when it gets particularly unpleasant, what is the only way to escape that? Honestly, it's to go to sleep, to fall unconscious, to disengage, and that has big problems in its own right. So one thing that VR does is it allows you an escape. It allows you to get out and explore and engage with the world outside the four walls of your hospital room. It allows you the only way, even with the biggest screen that you can have with console gaming, for instance, you still have everything outside that frame happening, and all the audio stuff happening. Through VR, you get not just immersion within the game, but isolation from something that you might want to ignore for a little while. So there's that. There's also the concept of presence and immersion that is deeply involved as I get into Red Dead or into Tomb Raider or Destiny. It's not the same level. I don't believe that I am in that experience at that time. But with virtual reality, you do have the ability to induce presence and immersion, even with very low quality. Quality is not the right term. Low quality graphics, simple games. They don't have to be AAA titles to be able to induce that. And if somebody is able to be distracted, we know this distraction is a key component of pediatrics, where sometimes it's just, hey, look over there. Sometimes it's getting somebody to pay attention to the right arm when you're giving a shot in the left arm. Sometimes it's giving them a task. It could be meditation. It could be other play or conversation. But VR is able to induce this in a way that is a little bit more replicable and a little bit more engaging than any of the other strategies that we have.
Wow. Are these kids playing, like, what kind of games are they playing in VR? Are we talking just commercial games you get off Steam? Are there specialty programs that are being developed specifically for hospitals?
Both. So we don't have just a single type of headset. In fact, pretty much everything you have commercially available, we have here in the hospital. We're experimenting with them, figuring out what's best for what situation and what kid, and what, they all have different strengths, right? So for the high-end sets, Oculus and HTC Vive, for instance, we're using the commercial stuff, and we're using Beat Saber, we're using the Climb, we're using Eagle Flight on the PS VR, and those out of the box have a lot of really neat features to them that we can use clinically, or just fun. And let's be honest, some of this is just fun, and that's great in its own right. But then we do have some that are being designed specifically for clinical use. There are a few of them out there now that are MRI simulators. So if anybody's had MRI, you have to lay very still, it's very loud, and it's very long. It's hard for a child to be able to do that. So there are situations, a lot of them actually, where the kids are, again, put under general anesthesia in order to tolerate an MRI. But we're probably doing it more than we need to, because if you go in there and it fails, that's a ton of time lost, that's a ton of money lost, and so the safer thing to make sure that you get the clinical answer, because if you're doing an MRI, there's serious situations you need to sort out sooner than later. You don't want to just give it a whack and see what happens. Well, with the MRI simulator, we'd be able to put the child through the MRI and understand if this is a kid who can actually hold still, and we can then spare them any of the anesthesia that would be needed. Or, if we do it the other way, everything's more efficient that way. We also have some other experiences which are meant to distract and engage a child for just basic procedures, placing an IV, setting a bone, doing some sutures, things like that. So it's the whole gamut.
And is this something that you find, just generally the entire sort of umbrella of what Child's Play has to offer, is this something that you still have to sort of convince naysayers of, or is it being more accepted widely than it was, say, 5 or 10 years ago?
It's definitely being more accepted, but there are people that don't know what VR is. They might have heard it once or seen it in a movie, and they have no real concept of what or why you would want to use this technology. There's also the pushback of fear, and we see this with every new version of tech that comes out. We saw with the tablets, in the last 10 years of, you're going to replace my job because you're just going to give a kid a tablet and let him get online. It's like, it doesn't work that way. But people have to be reassured that that's the case. What we've done to get over that is I have an education program specifically for our child life specialists, but we're bringing it in for a lot of the rest of the hospital to show them what and why and when not to use all this tech. And the fun thing is, it's about an hour at a time. They go from, many of them actually technophobic, having like, I'm not sure about this, I don't want to do it, starting to get engaged, and then we have them put on the headset. And you see the smile just kind of break, and then they start having fun and goofing around, and then they're showing their colleagues, oh, do this, try that one, and it just shifts. And suddenly they own that technology. They understand the tool. Like, oh, I could be using it over here. Or what do you think about using it in the GI clinic when we're doing this? That's a huge win, and that's been actually the best way that we've had moving forward to get it into the culture and just normalize it. It's not that VR is a cure-all. It's not. It's not that it's for everybody. It certainly isn't. But it is a new tool, and it has assets that nothing else has.
Cool. Moving away from VR for a bit here, you talked about how there's other programs that Child's Play has sort of allowed you to explore. Is there any in particular that you'd like to share with us?
And we've actually, our program in the hospital isn't called the virtual reality program, it's the extended reality program. We work with augmented stuff, but we also work with standard gaming, and we've started to push the boundaries in a few other spots. We've got a robotic telepresence program now that we're starting up, and this is just cool. You've seen these telepresence robots all over the place. Many of them are quite expensive, but they've dropped in price like everything else. And what we're able to do there, I'll give you a story, won't reveal the name, but had a kiddo, 9 years old in my ICU. He had been there for several weeks and is still there. So he's had a prolonged stay, again, stuck in the four walls, right? He got one of these telepresence robots, and within minutes of having it, he was able to drive it out of his room, went around the ICU and visited some nurses, stopped by the RTs, had some discussions, asked some questions, and they just goofed around. And he did a few tours. Then he decided with his mom he was going to leave, and so they left the ICU. They got into the elevator, went down a floor to our teen zone. It's a play space, but it's a space that you have to be non-infectious and not in isolation to get to. So that wasn't in the cards for him. He was able to go there anyway. There's games and basketball machines and all kinds of stuff there. It's really fun. So he was able to go there, and we had some volunteers. He made his mom a bracelet with the volunteers. So a little craft project. Then they found out that the Broncos cheerleaders were downstairs. So he left the teen zone. He got back in the elevator, went down to our studio, and got to meet and then had pictures taken as a robot with the Broncos cheerleaders.
That's so cool.
Upstairs. This is something, again, was not possible for him, but with this he is. And that telepresence program, what we're seeing, I could go down the list of children. A lot of our oncology kids are in the same position. A lot of our cystic fibrosis kids. A lot of our children who have neuromuscular problems, where they are paralyzed or are otherwise unable to really control their body or are dependent on other people in order to get out and engage. They can do it. So it's really exciting. The next stage of this, and we're not there yet, but we're working on it, is, you talk to kids in the ICU, especially at the end of life, and their biggest request isn't, I want to get better. Their request is, I want to go home. And at that point, it's something that's really hard to achieve, sometimes impossible. But with things like this, we can allow them to go home in a meaningful way that they can go and interact. So I want to get a robot program that we can loan. And if they're just missing a birthday party because they're hospitalized and they want to go to the birthday party, or they want to go, see their room and their dog and, play with their siblings or see their friends or even go to school, this type of technology is going to allow them to do that. So we're moving that direction as fast as we can.
Awesome, thank
we
you.
just got a point.
We just got a point.
What do I do? I've never gotten a point before.
Push start.
I pushed start.
Sorry, we just got a point in the game, and it requires some doing. Now just hit A, and you're good.
Well, yeah, it does.
Point gets?
You figured it out. Good
Hey,
job.
did you drive the whole time?
Well,
He's only been driving for he's been here for about an hour.
This is 4 points in a row, so that's 4 times 8, 32 hours without a crash so far.
Yeah.
Good job, buddy.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, sort of wrap this up, but I got a few questions from our viewers. It's more of a technical question. I'm actually kind of curious, though. But how do you manage infection risks with the kinds of toys, games, etc., that end up in your hospitals?
Huge challenge. There are some of these, especially the ones that have foam, that we cannot use on anybody who's on isolation. But there are a lot of aftermarket things that we can supplement. So some of those we can take the padding, change that out to something that is silicone covered or otherwise non-porous, and then we can clean with the bleach solutions that we need. The lenses are a challenge. We can use peroxide. We can use bleach. We know it's going to break down, and that's going to shorten the lifespan of a lot of this stuff. But that's part of the cost of using it in the hospital. So we recognize that that's a challenge. There's a few of them. We're working with Lenovo, for instance, and some of the other charities too. Their headset is actually one of the easier to clean, so that's becoming one of our workhorses. But yeah, there's some that we can't really use in any other way other than, and I just laughed when ID let us do this, but we can put on bouffant caps, like the surgical caps, and then pretty much gear people up, and then put on the goggles.
Huh.
At least they're able to play. It looks kind of silly, but it does work.
That's awesome. Well, I thank you so much for taking some time out of your, I'm sure, very busy day of helping kids and killing stormtroopers. I wish you the best of luck with that.
It's a balanced life.
You got to have a little bit of fun too.
Gotta have both.
But thank you so much again for calling in. Thank you for all the work that you do.
Yeah.
And have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you for all your support. And what Child's Play and Desert Bus has been able to do for the hospitalized kids is, I can't state it highly enough. It's phenomenal. Thank you for all the help.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day, Dr. Joe.
Have a great day.
Bye. Hey, well, thank you to Dr. Joe for calling in. That was very kind.
Holy moly.
And a lot of really cool information.
Yeah.
That I did not know. So that is partially where all this is going.
Yeah.
I also, as some people mentioned, I love that the way the overlay worked out. It looked like we were inside his cabinet.
Look, anytime he didn't have his arm over there,
That's where Desert Bus lives.
All right.
Is anyone familiar with what telepresence technology is, though? There's one thing. Is that the one where you put like a
like
video call?
It's like an iPad.
Yeah,
iPad
and they
that
get to have a
moves around.
voice chat, but they have the ability to move around.
You
So
can
it's like
move
they
around.
can explore places.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Like an iPad on a Segway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. All right,